Linda Aman, Aman Arts. Welcome to my world. I'm going to be showing you how to fill a watercolor palette. I've done quite a few of these in the past, and I have ideas of what I've done in the past that I'm going to change up a little bit, but I'll give you some thoughts on how you might want to give some thoughts on putting your palette together. Know that as soon as you've put all the colors in there and you start to work, you're going to go, I wish I would have put this color in or a different place. But just know that when you get it all set up, it's going to work for you. So I've had a lot of different palettes over the past. I have some small ones that I use for my students in classes, and then I have a larger palette. I'm going to show you what to do with extra colors as well. And a lot of what I do is I will look at the color chart, and the color wheel will give me an idea of how I want to place them. I don't worry about the yellows being in different places. I want them kind of combined in an area. And then what I'm going to be using is the M-Gram paints to fill my palette. And whatever you're going to use for your colors in your palette, you want to be sure that you mark what brand it is. Because every brand, even though the color is the same, there'll be a different recipe that they made that color, and it will be a little bit different. So I'm going to be using the Gram chart, and you can see that what I've done is I've put a little mark on all the ones that I'm going to put into my palette, because they won't all fit. So I'm going to put the ones that I use most and the ones that I teach with most. So this palette is a palette that has a lot of space, which means when there's a lot of space, the holes are going to be a little bit, the well spots are going to be a little smaller, but I can bring out the color into my working area and get the color out and have more choice this way for my palette. So I'm going to go from a palette that it's pretty used. I've got a number of them. They get really beat up. You can see it's all broken up, and this one's even better than most. But when they go through all the travel that I do at the airlines, I'm finding I need a little more sturdy one. And when I'm traveling from place to place and it goes in my suitcase, or even when it's going in a box and I'm going different places, I want to have something sturdier. So this is a good one. It's Cheap Joe's Piggyback palette, and it's got another palette that can fit here. And it's one I used for years. It's got big wells. I love it. But I'm trying a new one. And this one is called a Stay Wet, which is not the way I'm going to use it. And I will put the information for you how to get this. And I'm not going to use it with the sponge and everything in there because that would create mold, and I don't want to keep moisture in there. But I like the way that the actual palette is made. It's very sturdy. It's got a top and bottom. It's got a large area here I can work in, as well as where it can be in here. And I'm going to show you, I've laid out all my paints. I've counted out from looking at my chart. I decided what colors I wanted, where I wanted them placed, and what I do is I just lay them all in here, and I keep rearranging them so I have a visual look of where I want the different colors. So this particular palette's going to be all Gram. I'll show you what I do with some of the other colors that I use. But what I'm going to do is going to show you how I place each of the colors into the palette. Now the M-Gram paints are made with a honey base. And when they're made with a honey base, they stay more liquefied than when they use other sugars and other brands. You can work these with Daniel Smith and other colors together as long as you're using a professional brand, a good color, a good quality. But these are going to be that, especially here in Idaho, when it gets warm and the honey kind of warms up a bit, you wouldn't want to put the tray up on the side into your car or something because the paints can kind of sloth. The difference with your other colors, like Daniel Smith, and I'll show you here a little bit later, they harden up in the tray, and you can liquefy them, but when they harden up in the tray, you can actually have the whole color pops out and you can lose the color. So both things are not the actual perfect world, but I prefer the Gram paint because of the high quality of the paint itself. I like the flow of the way that the honey goes with the sugar base with the pigment, and I also like that they are really strong in their pigment base, so they're a good strong color. I like Daniel Smith next. I love their granulating colors, and I will mix these with those. I'll show you how I put those in another tray so that I can keep track of my different companies in different areas. Once you know your paints, you wouldn't even have to label them after you know them. But I keep them labeled not only for my own use to put it back in when I refill the area, but also for my artists who come to my classes. They can take a peek while I'm teaching as on the side of the tray what I'm using. So once I am decided what I'm going to do, and I've decided this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have some Vaseline that I'm going to have ready, because I want to be able to put the amount of the paint into the well, and then from that I want to be able to have the tube is able to be opened again. So on the gram paint and all paints, instead of just putting a little dab in, you want to give the largest surface area to your well of the paint as possible. So you can see I've already put the Payne's Gray in the corner, and see how it's moved from one side to the other. So once I have these all out, what I can do is I can open up the tube, and I can, this is sepia, and I've got it labeled on the side, and I'll show you that. And I'm going to put a fair amount all across the bottom so that I still have some in the tube, but I will store that away. But then what I will do is I will have enough of a surface area that I've got the largest surface area for it to dry. And then I'm taking a little bit of Vaseline on my fingers, running it onto the thread. Then I take a little piece of paper towel and clean off my fingers. And you can clean off a little bit of the paint if it's there. I'm going to put a little bit more Vaseline on. Then when you put the lid on, it will never stick for you. And you can kind of do it around a little bit so it's really good and juicy in there. The Vaseline does not get into the paint and give any trouble. But if you ever do have one of these that sticks, what I use is, instead of pliers, I use those old nutcrackers. And I meant to have one here, but the old nutcrackers to open it up, and it won't twist the tube so much. So I'm going to take that. I've already taken a felt pen, and I have, since I know where all these paints are going to go, see where it's all labeled on the side with all the names. If I were mixing colors, I would put MG for M Graham, Burnt Sienna. I happen to know this is going to all be the same company, so I don't have to do it on this palette. And then I'm going to take the next color, Burnt Sienna, and run it across and have it in that area. And then put a little more Vaseline. Even though I've used this tube before, if you put a little Vaseline on there, clean the lid a little bit, put the Vaseline on, put the lid back on, a little bit more on there. Put it back on, squish it around, put the lid on. You'll never have that stick. And you can do that with all your different paints that you have. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to worry about taking the time on camera for all of the fills, but you can see because I have it labeled, I can just open each one. Let's do Azo Yellow because it's a gorgeous color. And I'm just going to, again, across, put quite a few bit across. And then I would put Vaseline, pretend I put Vaseline on. I'm just going to hurry it here real quick. Put Vaseline on it, set it aside, and I'll be able to have all these labeled. So I'm going to set these aside because I'm going to do that off camera. I'm going to fill all these to show you what it looks like. And I'm going to give you some other little tips. But by doing this, I'm going to have it all organized by the names, and then you can see I'm coming in across the whole area. With my other colors of other companies, let me go get them real quick, or of the colors of Graham that I am not putting into the tray because they've got more colors than I have space for, I put them in these little containers. And these are actually bead containers. You can get them at your craft stores, and they're made for beads, but they're perfect for putting the colors you don't use very often. Or like right here, I've got a lot of Daniel Smiths that I have that are not in this tray, that I want them available. And when I teach, I actually want to be able to pass them around for people to be able to borrow. And then you can see that these are drier in here. This is a Daniel Smith. This is where I was talking about they harden up, and no problem, they can constitute back up when you put a little water on with a brush on them. But these will stay moist, and these harden up. And so one is that that it's harder, and one is a little bit softer. They both work great. So what I do with these is I take the extras, like let's say that I don't have permanent green light in my choices in this tray. Then what I would do is the M Graham, I would take and write on here M Graham. And because the screw top comes all the way off, you want to be sure and label the tops and the bottoms. And what I did is I took one of their brochures and cut it apart, or you can type it out, or you can put it on so that it's on tight, so that you've got the top and bottom. Here is where I've taken the Daniel Smith, and I have put DS, hematite, well this one's zoisite, DS for Daniel Smith, zoisite genuine, again, put it on the top and the bottom. And so then when I put it in here, I've got all my extras, and I've got quite a few of these bead containers that I've used for this. They have a little plastic top too. And when I pass them out, or when I'm traveling somewhere, I know I've got them all back when the places all fill up and the tray is filled. And I've got like 3 different of these different colors. The other thing I want you to be understanding that I think is very important is you'll read in books and you'll see artists talk about they spray down their watercolors to moisten them up. With your M. Graham paints, they already have the honey base in them, and you do not want to get more water in there because they're ready to go when you pull them right out, even after they have dried in the tray a little bit. Your Daniel Smiths, I agree, I even say that those you would not want to water down first, especially in a whole tray, because you're breaking down all of the wonderful things that they did to give you good paint. So instead, moisten your brush and just work it up in so that it starts moistening up. And that day when you're all done, make sure that any paints always have the extra water is either taken with a little bit of paper towel and taken out, or dumped out if there's any extra water in there, because you don't want it to break down. As well as if you have contaminants get in there, you could start some mold. The M. Graham with the honey, I just don't have mold, but some of the other brands will pick up a little bit of a mold sometime. And that is why I really don't want you to use this Stay Wet, where they give you a sponge that you moisten and put in and then put the top on and use it that way. You don't want to do that. But I think this tray is going to be a nice one for me. Another little tip that you might want to know is there are times that you're going to spell something wrong, like anthraquinone blue or something. And when you spell it wrong, or you've got them all labeled out and you didn't get the paint in the right well, this Brushmaster soap, if you take it and you just put a little bit of moistened tissue of a paper towel and you rub it across, you can take out the words totally with your felt pen that you did, the Sharpie that you used. You can totally erase that, get it clean again, get it dry, and re-put the new word down in the correct spelling or the right placement of the word. So don't worry if you make a mistake, this soap will work. And if you watch my other video that's on my YouTube channel, you'll see how you clean a palette, and you'll see that I also use this for getting the stain out of your palette when you have done a lot of painting. Also know that when you're working with a high pigmented paint like an M. Graham, you will have a little more staining in your tray. That shows there's good pigment in your paint. So don't let that concern you. Just once in a while and it won't come up with the next layer of your next color because it has just stained that area. But you could always get it bright white by putting the way that I would show you the cleaning in the next video. And the other video is the how to clean your palette once you've got it all messy. So that's basically it. I will show you how this is all filled in, but the choices that you make for your palette will be individual. But I think that you'll find that if you do a little bit of planning, look at your chart of whatever company, and whatever company you use, they can send you a chart, or you can get one online, and then you can make your choices as to what you want to do. And then your extras, you can put them in separate little palettes. I love these little bead containers that you can find at the different places that work great for me. I have all of them available, so when people come to class, they could test anything that's even in my tray. I've got extras here so that they would be able to test a color and be able to see if it's a color that they want to choose. So I hope this helps you out. I will show you a little end picture of when this is all in there, and this just fits down on top very nicely. It's very sturdy. It's a little heavier for me, but that's going to work when I do all the traveling. And the other thing they gave in the packet is they gave these little rubber bits or buttons. And what's nice is your tray won't move around so much because they give you 8. 4 for the bottom, 4 for the top of your tray so that you've got it very sturdy. So I think this is going to be a fun new palette for me. And whatever palette you choose, give thought to where you're going to place things. I consider doing the color wheel placements. Of course, the color wheel does not have your blacks and your browns, so you'll have to decide where that goes. And I always put in the corner, I always put Payne's Gray. So I thought I'd just read to you quickly the colors that I picked for the M. Graham for my palette. And you'll be able to see these when I'm finished. Azo Yellow, Gamboge, Indian Yellow, Scarlet Pyrrole, Quinacridone Red, Naphthol Red, Quinacridone Rose, Maroon Perylene, Quinacridone Violet, Cobalt Violet, Dioxazine Purple, Ultramarine Violet, Ultramarine Blue, Cobalt Blue, Anthraquinone Blue, Cerulean Blue, Phthalocylene Blue Red Shade, Prussian Blue, Cobalt Teal, Turquoise, Viridian, Cobalt Green, Permanent Green Pale, Hooker's Green, Olive Green, Raw Sienna, Nickel Quinacridone Gold, Quinacridone Rust, Burnt Sienna, Terra Rosa, Sepia, and Payne's Gray. And there's different choices here for you in what you'd want to do, but I think you're going to find this very helpful. Linda Aman, Aman Arts, thank you. Give me a thumbs up, share me, go over and check out my website, and also share this so that people can know more about how to fill their palettes. Thank you. Have a good day. Paint on. Hi, this is Linda Aman, Aman Arts, and this is the bonus section that I'm going to give you for filling your palette. I noticed that when I did the filling of the palette for you in part 1, or what you just saw, is that there were a couple things I wanted to tell you. And that is, one thing is when you get to the very last of a tube, and you can see that I've gone through and filled most of the wells. This one is Naphthol Red, and the Naphthol Red, the tube's getting down pretty far. So when you find that is happening, you're gonna find it's a little harder to get the paint out. And what I found is you can either cut out the bottom, or you can just work really hard off of the top and just keep squeezing down and down and down. And when you get down to the very bottom, bend it over. See if I can do it here for you. Bend it over, and then you put your thumb down into the section right here of the crimp over, and you just press and press and press. And then when you do that, you may have to get your paint kind of spread across a little bit with the tip because you've done that. There's more paint in here than I thought. Anyway, you can get all of it out. There's a teeny bit more in here, and I could keep working it to get it all out, and then you have that. The other thing I wanted to let you know, so here's another one, the Ultramarine Blue, that is getting down to the last, and I would do that same thing. I think I already put some in on that one. I did. So then Cobalt Green, this one up here, I'll show you, it's a real full tube, and when it's really full, quite often it comes out, and all the paints are a little different, it comes out pretty fast, so you can just kind of squeeze it across, be done with it, put your Vaseline on it, and it will work really easy the fuller they are. And then Viridian, here is another one that I did. Now the Viridian, what I want to show you about that is the Viridian, and these all are different, but there's plenty of mix of paint and honey and all the other things in here. And with the Viridian, when I put it out today, see if you can see it, right here you'll see that there's a little bit more of the honey that came out in it than some of the others. When you first open a brand new tube, that quite often happens, and if there's a lot of honey that comes out and oils, don't worry about it. There's plenty in the tube. I talked to Art Graham, the person who manufactures these, and he said just get a little extra out until it evens up. And then what I do is if you take the tube and you squeeze it to the opposite side it came out, it'll squeeze back down in, and you can, if something goes out too fast, you can always do that too. Then I'm going to put the lid back on, and this is the Viridian that was a little bit separated, and they happen when they get shipped or through the airlines and everything. When it comes out of the tube, sometimes that will happen. So then I will know that next time I want that to be a little more mixed. So I put the lid on tight and I massage it until all the paint and the oils and the honey and everything are mixed back in. But never worry that you don't have enough in the tube. They gave you plenty. So that's one of the tips. Another thing I wanted to let you know is when you do these, I put them out, get them all across, have them across for the largest space area that you can do on each of them instead of a little blob. And then I let them sit out, depending on where you live, I let them sit out for 3 to 5 days open. Make sure you don't have a pet or something walk through them and get it through your house. But if you have them just kind of skin over a little bit, that's better than leaving them capped off tight. You don't want to use them extremely fresh right out of the tube. You want to have them dry just a tiny bit. When you come to some of the granulating paints, the paints that are going to be with minerals, to be able to think about getting it out of the tube. So there are some Daniel Smith tubes of paint like the hematites and some of the zoisites and some of those. There's so much mineral in there, that the granulation of their actual rocks in there, that if you leave them in the tube, because right now we're using a partial tube, and I don't seem to have any trouble with the gran with all the honey in it. But the ones that harden up, and actually the other brands can actually harden in the tube before you get them out. So what I do with the hematites and some of the high granulators is I will put into my tray, whatever tray I'm using, those paints, and then the excess of that tube I will put out into other containers or share it with somebody so that they've got some of that paint. But I get it out of the tube so it doesn't harden in the tube. If it hardens all the way up in the tube, you could split it open, pop it out, and you have this mass of hard paint. But I like to actually make sure that it's on those high granulating paints that have the natural minerals in them, that I get them out of the tube so that they're all ready to use and I won't have that problem. Because I've had a couple tubes that have just hardened solid. So I'm thoughtful of that. I think that's about it. That was the bonus section, and have fun getting all your things, all your colors in there. And I think I'm gonna like this tray. There's a lot of different trays, different palettes that you can use, but this one I think is gonna be fun to try, so I'll let you know. Again, thumbs up. Thank you very much. Have a good day.